In 2023, 61% of gaming time was spent on games that are more than 6 years old. To make things worse, 5 games, most of which were released over a decade ago, altogether accounted for more playtime than every single game released in 2022 and 2023 combined.
Not like this.
But wait! There's more!
Out of the 23% of time share left of total playtime with new games, nearly 2/3 of those new games are, surprise, surprise, annual releases of long-established titles. Yep, your Call of Duty, 2K, you know the rest. So if you're keeping a tally, that means truly new games make up just 8% of playtime. 92% of it is going to old games or annual games of old franchises. That's right, some of the biggest games to ever release in all of gaming, Elden Ring, Baldur's Gate 3, Hogwarts Legacy, and Starfield, only touched 3.5% of that 8% of gamers' time. Over 14,000 new games dropped in 2023 on Steam alone, and they were all fighting for just 4.5%. Let's just look at the hard facts. That 61% of playtime going to older games is no accident. These are games that have mastered the art of long-term player retention. They offer progression systems, social ecosystems, and constant content updates that keep players locked in. But what happens when every game is trying to do the same thing? Well, we get a market that's chasing its own tail. Developers, but mostly publishers, see the success of live service giants and want to replicate that. So every new game tries to follow the live service model, promising years of content, updates, and engagement. But here's the catch. There's only a finite number of players and a limited amount of time that they can dedicate to games. It's a zero-sum game where someone's gain is someone else's loss. Tim Sweeney, CEO of Epic Games, recently pointed out during Unreal Fest about how the gaming industry is undergoing what he calls a generational change, where even games with high budgets aren't selling as well as they used to.
And this is all happening in the context of a game business that's rapidly changing in a way that we've only seen a few times in our lifetimes as game developers. It's a generational change, and one of the manifestations we're seeing right now is a lot of games are released with high budgets, and they're not selling nearly as well as expected, whereas other games are going incredibly strong. And what we're seeing, the real trend here, is that players are gravitating towards the really big games where they can play with more of their friends.
In his words, the market is shifting, and that partially is due to the players' gravitation towards fewer long-lasting games. Now, is Tim Sweeney correct? Well, yes. Fortnite, a live service game under his own umbrella, represented a massive shift towards titles that are less about upfront sales and more about long-term engagement. And while Sweeney's absolutely right that the landscape is changing, we have to ask ourselves, is this the right path forward? Sweeney believes that this is the natural evolution of gaming. And sure, from a business perspective, that makes sense. We've got games as platforms now, not just products, and developers are moving towards models that promise long-term profitability. Now, Sweeney's definitely right about one thing. We are in the middle of a generational shift, but whether that shift leads to better, more innovative games, or just a handful of big live service platforms monopolizing the market is still relatively up for debate. So for much of the outcry of gamers saying that they are sick and tired of live service games, the data doesn't seem to back that up. So much like myself, you're probably all wondering, why are gamers frauds? Ryan Rigney is the marketing director over at Odyssey Studio and also led comms for big live service games Apex Legends, League of Legends, and PUBG. In a blog post that inspired this video, The Gamers Are Locked In, he does a very good job explaining why players are sticking to these older games. It's not just about the gameplay, it's about the social and emotional investment. Players aren't just playing Destiny 2 or Valorant just because they love shooting stuff. They're playing because their friends are there. They've spent money on skins, they've reached skilled heights in ranked, and they've put in hundreds of hours of progress. They are, I can't believe I'm about to say this about League of Legends, their comfy game. But out of all these reasons, skill is probably the biggest reason for this. And I've personally witnessed this within my own friend group, where the ties that bind some of them to older games make it difficult for them to adapt to new ones, lending them to quit them and go back to what they're comfortable with. Let's be honest, no one likes to pick up a brand new game and suck at it for a few months on end and spend even more time watching educational content to learn how to get better at it, especially when there's already a game out there that they're already good at. There's also the sunk cost fallacy, that if you've invested so much time and money into a game, it becomes really hard to walk away from that.
All that effort, you're just gonna toss it away?
That's the sunk cost fallacy.
And that's really a hard sell for most players. It's not that new games aren't fun, it's that they require a level of commitment that players have already given to something else. And this is really why new games nowadays are struggling. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, it just simply isn't enough just to be a good game anymore. You have to offer something that players can't get anywhere else, and even then, you're asking them to abandon years of progress in another game to start fresh. This is the vicious cycle that we're seeing. There's only so many hours in a day, and players can't invest in more than a handful of these time-consuming games. When every new game tries to be a live service game, there is no room for all of them to survive. Executives keep chasing after a piece of that live service pie, but the truth is the pie isn't getting bigger, it's just getting sliced thinner and thinner. And you know what? I'll let you in on a little secret. There was a moment where executives thought that the pie was in fact getting bigger. Do you remember when that was? It was during the pandemic, and we all know what that mistake has costed us, and is still costing us to this day. That's not only why we're seeing games launch and die within months, but also why we're seeing games that have been revealed and some that have been unseen die quietly through the night. Sega, I believe last year, canceled Project Hyenas, who remembers that game, acknowledging that they couldn't sustain the resources required to maintain a live service game after launch. And they're not the only ones. Naughty Dog also halted its multiplayer of The Last of Us spinoff for similar reasons. This current trend is unsustainable, and only the strongest, most established games are surviving. But what if I told you there was still a way to get a piece of that claimed pie? And just because many players are stuck to their current games doesn't mean that they are a lost cause. Recently, I've been putting a lot of time into Valve's latest project, Deadlock. It's a third-person shooter meets MOBA hybrid, and it's a game that takes its DNA design from Dota 2, the lovable characterization of Team Fortress 2, and combines it with the popular third-person shooter perspective that has been tested before via Smite and Paragon. That was also a game made by Epic Games. Small world. See, Deadlock takes what's already established, introduces a new genre combination with the backing of the reputation of Valve, which nowadays plays a huge role for brand new games, especially when you're competing against brand new live service games from unknown studios. However, this could be seen as a form of cannibalization within Valve's already established player base, as the Dota 2 player count seemed to be dancing with Deadlock's a little bit. Not only that, but there's also Fortnite, which took the explosive popularity of PUBG years ago and added their own combination of Minecraft-like building mechanics, and even Apex Legends and Call of Duty came in and took their own formulas and fused them together. This tells us something important. Regardless of what you may hear players screech about a new live service game is announced, overall players are not sick of these types of games, as long as they are still familiar to another game that they've had a connection to in the past. Or, like myself, they've been preying on the downfall of another live service game that they've been playing due to the neglect from its developers. These games all came for PUBG's pie, yet PUBG is still alive and kicking, while each of them have helped establish the current market of that genre. The truth is, gaming isn't fighting a war against other games, it's fighting a war of attention. The same reason you can waste away hours on TikTok is the formula that gaming has been fighting to replicate with each passing game release. So what does that mean for the future of game development? Rigney's Are Old Games Killing New Games article argues that the rise of live service games could stifle innovation, and I completely agree. If developers are too focused on creating long-term engagement and content updates, they might shy away from taking creative risks. You can look no further than Respawn and Apex Legends for evidence of this. And I think in the long run, this could really hurt the gaming industry. We'll see fewer single-player narrative-driven games and more titles that are designed as platforms to keep you playing forever. Now, this isn't hyperbole or me trying to rage bait you. Publishers like Sony are significantly increasing their investments in live service games. Sony, known for its dedication to single-player experiences, plans for live service content to account for 60% of its internal investments by 2025, up from just 12% in 2019. Hogwarts Legacy made a big splash at launch. In fact, it was the biggest selling game of 2023, but 64% of its users were acquired in the first month, showing how front-loaded single-player games can be. In contrast, live service games keep players engaged and spending over extended periods of time. Warner Bros. And major publishers are moving more aggressively towards live service games, viewing them as more financially sustainable compared to the one-and-done nature of many single-player games, even at the cost of the reputation of its biggest IPs. Just this year alone, some of the biggest single-player heavyweights are failing to meet sales expectations, from Final Fantasy XVI to Star Wars Outlaws. This is why when a game, for example, like Space Marines 2 drops and people cry out about how modern gaming is missing this type of game, it has less to do with silly discourse of what a CEO said and more about a simple truth. Somebody in the year of our Lord 2024 made a AAA single-player experience with a campaign, co-op, and multiplayer PvP day one as a complete package, and it never overstayed its welcome. In the end, the gaming industry has found itself caught in potentially a self-destructive cycle. Older live service games are now dominating players' times, leaving little room for new games to thrive. Executives are chasing a model that only few games can succeed in, while the rest struggle to fail. So you might be wondering, what's the answer? Or perhaps are we too far gone? Maybe we need to see a return to games that are complete experiences and not just platforms designed for infinite engagement. Maybe we need to rethink what success looks like in the gaming world instead of pointing at the ups and downs of a game's player count graph. Because if we don't, the cycle will continue, and we'll keep seeing new games fall flat because players are already too invested in the old ones. And that's not a future I want to see for gaming. Ball up top.